Hello and welcome to Just Around the Corner with Dennis Mansfield. It's a podcast focused on culture, history, travel, and even a little entertainment from time to time. I think you'll enjoy traveling with me and my guests, my clients and friends on each episode. Today's episode is entitled Ideation, Creativity, and Spontaneity with my guest, Mr. Curtis Barrett, who's a businessman and a longtime friend. Now, as a business coach, podcaster, and author, I invite you to subscribe to my newsletter by visiting my landing page at dennismansfield.com and clicking on the yellow bar with writing on it. You know, it's really nice to have you with us. I'm Dennis Mansfield.
Thank you for joining Just Around the Corner with Dennis Mansfield. As John Hay, one of the most famous men of the 19th century, once said, all the great prizes in life are just around the corner. Let's go there together.
Well, ideation, creativity, and spontaneity, those are the words for today. Those are the opportunities for us to examine. Curtis, honored to have you with us. Why those three words?
Those three words represent how you can create anything in your life that you'd like to. And when it comes down to it, anybody can learn them.
Well, if you think about it, first off, you have to define them. So let's start with the definition of ideation.
Ideation is the connecting of concepts and knowledge together. And I've actually come to realize it's a little bit more than that. It's the ability to assume a viewpoint.
Okay.
Where I can have a different idea than you can have, but with ideation, I can understand and duplicate it and go, okay, I can now see how you're coming from this perspective, I'm coming from this perspective. But in having more than one place that I'm viewing from, I can now actually see from different points of views. So when I'm going to create something, I can go, oh, hey, now this is how this works. This is how this works. I'm sure you've heard the famous story about Henry Ford, how he said you can have the Model T in any color as long as it's black.
Yes.
That's a great example of someone who's stuck on one viewpoint and could not see that there were other people that went, hey, I want this.
Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, the very first time that I ever came in contact with ideation is from StrengthsFinder.
Yes.
And you took the StrengthsFinder assessment. It's kind of nice because you buy the book, then you go online, and then the book breaks down what these are. Ideation was number one out of all the concepts, if I remember correctly, in yours.
Yeah, and I've always had a gift for being able to imagine lots of different ways of the same thing. It drove my brother nuts because he was very much, growing up, he was a black and white. It's this, it's that, it's not this, it's not that. And I'd be like, well, what about this? Like, what about this little random scenario over here? And he's just like that's like nonsense. Why are you?
So to everybody that's listening or watching the podcast today, they're going, yeah, I had a brother like that, or I was that brother.
Yes.
and when you think about it, you grew up in a very, very large family. You had your two brothers, you have your sisters.
Yep.
And you were the firstborn.
I was.
So in that capacity, you led the pack, and yet the pack at times wasn't willing to follow you.
Oh, absolutely.
And when we say the word ideation, certainly the concept is that there are ideas that flow through your mind. You start expanding on those ideas. You start moving with those. And the people, like your brother, as you just mentioned, who's black and white, is saying, whoa, rein this baby in. I don't know where you're going.
Exactly.
What was that like on your side of the fence to be going, well, clearly, you should know where we're going. Follow me. I'm your older brother.
Yep. As a kid, I didn't understand that one of the worst things in the world for anybody is to be told that you're wrong. And as a kid, that's basically what I was doing, is I was proving him wrong by throwing out all these different alternatives. And the thing I've come to realize is it really, yes, there are some areas that matter, but by and large, you're good to have a viewpoint that is totally different than me. And the more that I can admire and understand your point of view, the easier it is for us to communicate, because it's something that we share, that we're able to.
And now stop for a second. In a world of politics where everything is so divisive, the right and the wrong, in the world of faith, where it's, I've got the truth, you don't have the truth. In the world of all this, how do you measure and contrast the idea of, you have a point of view, allow me to know it better. I have a point of view, I hope you would allow yourself to know my point of view, and avoid those bombs that happen and are happening every day more and more.
I like that. That is an excellent question. What happens is I've shifted how I see the truth, in that everybody has, and let's set aside right and wrong, truth and false, and let's just look at, I've got a space, and in this space, I get to put things in there. Kind of a counterexample to this is, growing up, I used to play the slug bug game with friends and cousins, and my cousins, though, had.
Were you the slugger or the sluggy?
It was a good mix, except for one case. My cousins had a second-roll Corvettes.
You haven't let it go.
Oh, I totally haven't. They would do Corvettes, and if you saw a Corvette and called it out, you got to hit twice.
Oh.
I had Corvettes were not in my space. I could not see them. They could be, look, it's the neon pink one right there. And I'm like, where? I don't see this
because
thing.
In your idea, in your mind, you had no idea what a Corvette was.
I had no idea what a Corvette was.
Well, that's a good picture.
So when it comes to it, I have a space, which is where I put the things that I find important and valuable. You have your own space where you take and put your own things in there. And the problem is, if I try and tell you what you should have in your space, I'm telling you that you're wrong, and there's a resistance. It's a force counter force.
And those things that I currently have in my space are wrong as well.
Exactly. Because, I mean, for me, if you talk about one thing in my space, it's not one thing. It is, like, especially with my ideation, it's connected to dozens of other things.
They're all connected.
And they're very interconnected.
A net.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what happens for me now is I find, one, I can ask questions to understand what's in your space, to really duplicate it, to really get in there. And when I share, I don't share to tell you what to think. I share, hey, this is what I have in my space. It'd be like if I went and I baked some cookies. It's like, hey, I'm sharing some cookies. You do not have to take my cookies.
Yeah.
You could totally go, hey, not a fan of snickerdoodles. Like, no, thank you.
Why'd you have to
I'm
bring
like,
this? All I'll be thinking about now is snickerdoodles. Oh, I can't wait to have some.
Yeah.
So, but let me ask this hard question.
Yeah.
In the world, you're a follower of Jesus. You believe the Bible is absolute truth.
Yeah.
You acknowledge all of that in your life.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to use the term yet. Yet, a person listening to you could say, or watching you could say, it sounds like he's got a squishy new age kind of thing going on. Your truth is your truth. My truth is my truth. That's not what you're talking about.
Absolutely not. It's not the truth. Like, it's not like, okay, we got the laws of gravity, laws of electricity, but it's what have I brought and incorporated into my reality of, like, hey, just like with that Corvette where that was not a part of my reality. I couldn't see it as a kid. We all have areas where they could be blind spots. They could be areas where it's like, oh, okay, here's a good example. I'm getting trained by a personal trainer at the gym. He's got this whole area in his space around training about what do the exercises look like, how do they work, how do they function. So actually just this last Monday, I was working with him on squats, and I was communicating with him because I was not understanding what was in his space. So it was like, okay, do the exercises. Is that where am I at? Am I closer to your ideal scene or less close?
Right.
And as we went along, I was able to ask questions to fully duplicate what the squat was. And when I got it, it was like that. It was just instantly, my butt is almost on the floor. I'm squatting down there with weight, and everything is working in harmony together. You
understood the rules of engagement.
I did.
Boom, you had it.
And that's where, like, I took something that was in his space that he understood, that he knew, and I was able to take it and duplicate that into my space to where it's like, I get it now. I can actually do a squat and not injure myself.
So in a certain sense, it's understanding experientially what someone is trying to communicate to you verbally or that you're seeing visually. And you're looking at it, you're not quite getting it, you're not quite listening, hearing it, and all of a sudden you experience it and you go, now I get it.
That's a very good way of putting it.
Okay, that makes sense. Now we're the concept of today, of course, is looking at ideation, and creativity, and spontaneity. So let's go into the idea of creativity. How have you managed as a businessman, as an incredibly gifted man in the high-tech industry, as someone who's put on events all over the world to bring people in for education and encouragement and the change of their own lives. How have you been able to harness your creativity so that they're not just brain burps? You know what I mean? Where a lot of people go, oh, I could do that. I should do that. I ought to do that. Burp. It's gone.
I've totally been there. First, let's talk about what creativity is. And specifically, let's go back to the root of creation. Creation is at its core bringing something out of nothing.
Yes.
For no reason whatsoever. If you really want to truly create something, it's got to be, this didn't exist before, it exists now, and I'm not giving it a reason why it needs to exist. What I find is when I try and create something where it's really a derivation if I'm adding a prior reason to it. And the thing is, I can totally take something and make something where I've learned something before it. But when I get down to it, I want to split the reason away from the idea itself, from the act of creation. So creativity, when I run into problems, it's usually because I've added in some form of the past, where it's like, oh, I can't do this because of this.
Some negative thought kicks into gear?
Exactly.
Okay.
And when I separate, like here's a good example. I've had several projects at work where the idea is normally, like if I'm looking at the past, it's difficult. Like there's just, okay, there's this problem, I've got to solve it. It's in the tech space. Maybe it's brand new, I don't know it. But when I stop and just go, okay, let's set aside the past. In the present, what am I creating? Here's the end goal. I can now go, okay, boom. I always solve it faster than I ever would if I'm trying to go, okay, let me look at this. Let me see what's going on here. What's going on over here. It's just like, okay, boom. Relationships.
So okay, I want to get to the relationships in just a second. So what you're saying is you establish this end point that you want to get to.
Your ideal scene.
Ideal scene. And then you move your way to it based on what logically and creatively comes to you. See, to me, that's fascinating because ultimately, as an author, I will sit down and plan out what I'm going to write. And as I get writing, suddenly things come to me that, where did that come from? I don't know, but I'm going to go with that. And my mind is working while my mind is working, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like two gears at the same time.
Yep.
And that's the creativity you're talking about when you're in business or whether you're putting on an event or now let's go to relationships. Talk to me about that.
Let's say you have a relationship and there's been problems in it. And you're at a point where it's like if you keep doing what you've been doing, you're going to continue getting worse and worse problems. Because the thing is, nothing ever stays the same. You are either improving or you're declining. Yeah. It's one of the two. It is never, ever the status quo.
Plateauing.
So if you got to a point where you have a result that you don't want, you're fighting with your spouse, your kids hate you, whatever. If you say, okay, well, I've got to rely on the past to try and do something different in the future, you're never actually going to get to the result that you want. Because you're going to always be saying, well, but they're just redoing what's already happened in the past. But if you can stop for a moment and go, what is it that I want to create? So like here's an example. I've been in arguments where it's like somehow I get caught up in the moment. I'm frustrated, I'm mad, something has gotten under my skin and I'm just like, the moment I realize it, I will stop and say, hey, I need a moment. Give me like 30 seconds. And I will stop And I'll go, okay, what is it that I want to create here? What is it? What's my ideal scene? Like, what am I? Because me fighting with you doesn't really bring about any positive results.
Yeah, there's nothing positive about it.
It's two people butting heads. But if I go, oh, okay, I want to resolve this situation with you. Like, let's say it's something that's really bothering me that you're doing. It's like, I want to be able to resolve this situation. I go, here's what my ideal scene is. And now I can stop and go, okay, hey, thank you. And with that new intention, I find the emotions always drop down. Even if it was initiated by the other side, where it's like they're really upset with me and I've got caught in their game. It's like I can stop and I can be the one to say, no, I don't need the emotional game here because it's not serving me.
Let me move in a different direction.
Sure.
That moves off of that. You're a single guy.
Yep.
You're looking forward to being married.
Yes.
You love kids. You'd love to have a brood of little rascals running around
Yep.
you. I think having known you for as many years as I have, you'd be an excellent father.
Thank you.
In order to go into a relationship, a new relationship that would move you towards marriage, what do you see as a single man do you need to do so that when you do have conflict with a young lady you're dating or maybe someone that's in the pipeline that is interested in you, that you can use the conflict to in order to allow you to move into deeper and better intimacy? In other words, I've said for years and taught on this and coached on this that conflict can be, if we'll let it, be the threshold that allows us into greater intimacy.
Yeah.
Not being mean, not being brutal, just acknowledging that conflict is.
Yeah.
So how do you do that in a relationship with someone who you're just getting to know, who could end up being your wife? I mean, I've been married for a long time. You will be married for a long time.
Yeah.
I can tell you how I have learned to do it, but from your position of ideation and creativity, how do you do it now and how do you expect to do it when you find the right girl?
So my personal view on conflict is that if you're in a good communication with the other person, there's rarely a need for conflict to actually happen, because instead of fighting with each other, we can just come and go, okay, hey, what's the game we're playing? What is it that we want to, what's the agreement that we're going to come to? Anytime I get caught up into a conflict, there's always some emotion on my part. And with that emotion, I've taken the stance that it's me. It's not the other person. It's always me. And I will take a look and go, okay, what's the source of this? Like, what's causing this to pop up and be bigger than it needs to be? And I don't usually do it in the moment. This is usually something I'm doing a little bit after hindsight. But I'm going, okay, hey, what happened here? And I always find what my why was, and I let it go.
Interesting.
I use these moments of conflict to go, okay, what is it about me that allowed this conflict to happen? Because if I have to have you be the one that gets changed and improved, I'm the effect of you. I'm a victim of you.
I see, yeah.
And rather than being a
unhealthy.
victim, if you have to be the victim, it's totally a valid way to live your life. I just find it to be less effective than going, okay, what am I creating here?
You mentioned that it's a valid way to live your life.
Yeah.
There are people who would greatly disagree with you about victimhood. I'm not a victim of anything. How could that be a valid way to live? How do you address that?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. If you're not a victim of anything, great, not a problem. If you want to say that I'm a victim of something, great. You have to decide for yourself, are the results what you want them to be? And if they're less than what you want them to be, change.
Which goes back to the concept of the ideation.
Yep.
Now, ideation births creativity. Creativity goes back and fuels ideation. What about spontaneity? It's the third part of our discussion today.
Yes.
Walk me through that.
Spontaneity has two forms. One is true and one is widely accepted.
That's a great way to put it.
The widely accepted way is it's an impulse. Like, oh, hey, I saw that donut. Oh, I was just tempted. I couldn't control myself.
Yeah.
And so there's this lack of control that comes with spontaneity for a lot of people. True spontaneity is just being able to do something for no reason at all. It's like, for me, if I get a call from a friend and it's like, hey, do you want to come do this? And I can go, oh, hey, I have an opportunity. I don't have anything scheduled for that time. I'm going to be spontaneous, and I've made a decision to go do something with no prior cause, no reason. And it's not even because it's going to be fun, or like the moment I add reason, I still fall into the trap of, oh, well, it's an impulse, it's this. But true spontaneity is a moment of creation, because you're just able to go, hey, spontaneously, I'm making this happen.
It's very interesting that you say that, because when I think of the practical application of it, I happen to drive a little Saturn Sky. It's a cool little sports car. It's aging, as they say, because Saturn stopped being a company a number of years ago. But I don't care how old it is. I love driving it, and when I'm driving it, I am aware of everyone on the road, and in a spontaneous fashion, I can see someone start to move, and I have a choice to either respond or react. The two are different.
They're very different.
And it's all anchored to spontaneity, so I have to determine immediately, do I pull out for safety's sake and move back away? Do I accelerate to avoid a potential problem? Do I look at the person and realize he or she is a hothead, and I've no room in my life for hotheads, so I'll back the way off. And what's a joy for me is in that little car, man, it responds.
Yeah.
In the case of us, sometimes we respond, but not in a positive way, not in a way that we're in control. Our spontaneity can be triggered by things that we remember because of Mr. So-and-so, A, B, C, cause, whatever.
Yep.
And our reaction ends up being negative. How do you channel spontaneity so you avoid that?
It comes back to the two words you used, reaction and response. The negative side of spontaneity is rooted in reaction. And reaction is I'm acting in the past. See, anytime you react, every time you react, it is never in the present moment. It is always, there's something that happened in the past that has been re-stimulated, that is now causing, and it's not just one time too. It could be every single time you've had the same sort of thing happen, and it adds up, it builds up, and now in the present moment you've reacted, and it's like,
Hence the very definition, to act again.
Yes, exactly.
React.
You are acting, you are bringing the past back into the present, and that is always a prior cause, and that is never an act of creation.
Yeah.
And so you don't actually have spontaneity when you're reacting, because you're acting in a specific way. Whereas if you can respond, where you are the one putting what is happening there, you're the one now that has the ability to take control. And you can choose in that moment what you want to create.
Curtis, to that viewer who is, right now watching this and saying, tell me how I can sharpen my ability for ideation, increase my creativity, and use my spontaneity in a positive way. Talk to him or talk to her.
Absolutely. One, just make a decision. Anytime that you have something that is less than ideal, that is not going the way that you want it, just stop and just for a moment go, if nothing else was at play here, if there wasn't this restraint, if I wasn't tied up by this, if this hadn't happened, what would I create? What would I choose to put there in this particular moment? And then take any action, even if it's one that looks a little bit worse. It's more important that you take action on that regardless of the outcome, it will bring about an improvement in your life. The best definition of success I've ever come across is success is the sum total of all validated improvements. And there's a lot to that sentence.
Say that one more time.
Success is the sum total of all validated improvements. If you want to improve, you celebrate those little tiny improvements, any kind of improvement, and those improvements will come about by making a decision. When you're stuck reacting to the past and you catch yourself and you recognize it, take a moment, and it works. People will usually respect you. I won't promise every time, but I have noticed for myself that I say, hey, I need a moment. Like, I can tell that I'm reacting here. Give me a second. And then I decide, what is it that I want to create? With no prior cause, none of the argument even matters. Even if we'd been arguing for 2 hours, I will stop and say, okay, the past doesn't matter. What am I creating right now? And I always see that the next thing I do brings about an improvement.
That's fantastic. Curtis, we're going to come in for a landing here.
Okay.
I've thoroughly enjoyed this episode.
Me too.
Of our podcast. You know, I call it Just Around the Corner because so much of our life is right in front of us if we'll only stop and think about it. It's the best is yet to be.
Yes.
No matter what we're dealing with today, we've got a wide open windshield. We're looking through it. Instead of driving backwards with a really small rearview mirror, we get to move forward. We get to turn just around the corner.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I hope from today's episode is that people will realize the corner that they're facing is a possibility corner.
Yes.
Not a negativity corner. In your final comments, speak to that issue of courage to move towards that possibility corner.
Courage is the ability to momentarily set aside the risk and the consequence and take an action. I actually had my best example of this several years ago. I had talked to you about dating and meeting new people, and at the time there was someone else with us, and you're like, hey, Jessica over here, she's great with this. You should talk with her. And all of a sudden, Jessica's like, oh, you know what? There's this dog walk coming up. You could come take my dog and take him to the dog walk. I'm not going to be here, so I can't take him. And I'm just like, oh, it was so terrifying. It was like the fuel of my nightmares.
Yes.
But I, in that moment, somehow realized that it was so terrifying to me that I had to do something about it. Mm-hmm. And for one moment, I got the courage. I set aside the risk and the outcome, and I asked the best question. I made a decision, and I asked her, were you serious? Because I couldn't ask her to do it. That was still at the time too outgradient. But I asked her, were you serious? And she said yes. And I did go to that dog walk, and it brought about a huge improvement.
That's incredible. Open doors.
Yep.
Curtis, thanks for being on the episode today. Thank you for your years of friendship, for impacting people's lives, and for the opportunity to see your own life change. You're an inspiration, and I look forward to seeing and continuing to coach and be your friend for years to come.
Yep.
And maybe even singing at your wedding.
Oh, absolutely. That's a done deal.
I don't know. What do you think? I was thinking about What's New, Pussycat, or You're So Vain. Those are great songs.
Oh, absolutely. Your choice.
I got to do it with Tom Jones wigs and clothes and Ancient
Absolutely.
of Days.
I just know whatever you sing will end up on YouTube.
Well, that ends it right there. Well, Curtis, thanks for being on the episode.
Yeah.
Appreciate your spontaneity. Appreciate your creativity. And certainly I love your ideation.
Thank you.